Madam Chair, I would like to ask the committee to hear from Mr. Ken Phillips, who's an attorney. Mr. Phillips specializes in these cases. He is an attorney and has tried cases in practically every state in the country. And I had conversations with Mr. Phillips, and I was struck by his knowledge and his awareness of these issues, both legally and also as far as the impact just upon individuals and families and the harm that dogs can do. And I would ask the committee to please allow Mr. Phillips to speak for a few moments.
Madam Chairman, my name is Kenneth Phillips. I'm an attorney at law, and my law practice is devoted entirely to representing dog bite victims. I am also the author of Dog Bite Law, which is a treatise that is online. It is considered to be the most comprehensive place where one can find analysis of the dog bite laws throughout the United States. The particular bill, as Senator Jackson just mentioned, that is currently our focus, is the civil law. The civil law in Tennessee dates all the way back to the 1600s in England, when dogs and goats and pigs and mules wandered through towns aimlessly, and judges had to decide, should there be liability if one of these animals causes any kind of harm? Now, at that time, they decided that it would be unfair, pursuant to the way their society was then. Things have changed since then. Among other things, we live in crowded cities. Number two, we have pit bulls now. Pit bull did not exist in those days because they didn't have dog fighting in those days. We now have principles of human rights in America that America didn't even exist when these laws were first announced, when this principle, this one-bite rule, was first announced. The problem with the one-bite rule is that it creates a kind of a culture among dog owners that they're just not responsible the first time each one of their dogs bites somebody. If they have one dog that bites somebody, if they have two dogs and each dog bites somebody once, no liability. If they have three dogs, each dog bites somebody once, no liability. If they replace those three dogs with three more dogs, and each of those dogs bites somebody once, there's still no liability. No liability means no accountability. No accountability means no vigilance. There has to be vigilance on the part of dog owners, because the dog owner is the one who is in a position to know their own dog. A dog owner is in a position to make sure the dog is healthy, to make sure that a dog is trained properly, to make sure that a dog is socialized properly. These are all factors that experts now know figure into dog attacks in the usual case. So when we say to dog owners, you are literally not responsible the first time your dog bites somebody, we're simply saying you don't need to be vigilant. You don't need to guard against these kinds of accidents that are causing such a great loss in terms of people, in terms of money, and in terms of people's potential. So the one-bite law needs to go. It doesn't fit anymore. It is something that came from the past. Tennessee is now saluting the flag of England when it comes to its dog bite laws. That's not right for the citizens of this state. It's not right anywhere. Tennessee is in the minority. There are only 19 states that now observe this rule of England. Most states have eliminated the one-bite rule so that their citizens are protected from the beginning. When it comes to doing this, you're making a choice between putting the burden of these injuries on the victim or putting the burden on the dog owner. It is the dog owner that can control this type of thing, can keep it from happening. Every organization that has spoken on with regard to, for instance, breed-specific laws has said, put the responsibility at the right end of the leash, meaning the dog owner. Put the responsibility on their shoulders. You can't contradict that by saying that the first bite is free. So I'm here to urge that the committee pass this particular piece of legislation eliminating the one-bite law for civil purposes in the state of Tennessee.
Any questions of Mr. Phillips? Senator Stanley.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. Can you characterize dog bites? I mean, we've heard of some very tragic cases today where, a single dog or a group of dogs have attacked individuals. But from a percentage standpoint, can you characterize the types of cases that you defend?
Right. I have cases that involve, first of all breeds of dog. So I know that breed-specific laws are not going to.
My second part of my question will deal with rank the top 5 breeds, just after you pick.
Well, there are statistics about which dogs are more dangerous, but those statistics were created by the CDC. And the CDC has said that they should not be misused to label certain breeds as being dangerous. I mean, we all know the Pitbull and the Rottweiler cause more deaths combined. Those two cause the majority of deaths of people. I have cases, though, that involve just about every kind of dog causing a lot of physical damage. 4.7 million people are bitten in the United States every year by dogs. It's a big problem in this country. 800,000 people go to a doctor every year because of being bitten by dogs. Every day in the U.S., there's 1,000 people in emergency rooms because of being bitten by dogs. And it's across the board. In places where they have had breed-specific laws passed, like, for instance, in England, where they have banned the pit bull, there have been a couple of studies that suggest that their dog bites in general are not going down. Why? Well, you got irresponsible dog owners. They're going to pick a different kind of a dog. So that's to answer your question about the breeds. I find in my practice, pit bulls, Rottweilers, Chows, and Akitas are the dogs that come up the most. But I have them from every breed, and I've handled thousands of cases. You had another question about characterizing the attacks themselves. One of the things that I would like to tell you is that so many of my cases involve a first bite. A first bite. A dog, let's say, that's 10 years old or 12 years old, turns around and bites somebody. It's a lab. And the dog owner says, I don't know why it happened. When we dig deeper into a case like that, we find that the dog was unhealthy. He was sick. In one case, a little girl petting a dog on the head, the dog turned around and damaged her face with a bite to her face. Dog owner said, I don't know why. It was the first bite. The dog was 12 years old. It was a lab. But in the deposition of the dog owner, after hours, he finally told me that his dog had a chronic ear problem, that you couldn't touch the dog behind the ear. The dog owner was in a position to warn the girl and her family because the dog owner knew about that. That's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. The dog owner usually has some idea, usually can control it, usually can prevent it. And that's why it's right to say that there is civil liability from the first bite on. Did that answer your question?
Senator Flynn.
Yes, sir, Mr. Phillips. You were in your presentation. You were talking about putting the burden on either the dog owner or the victim. And as a dog owner myself of several large breeds, I understand completely that trust is the enemy when dealing with an animal. You don't trust them to always behave. You always believe they're an animal. At the same time, when strict liability is so one-sided, in contemplating this particular piece of legislation, can you not see an instance where when you invite someone onto your property, you warn them of the dog, you also specifically tell them not to, and if someone goes in and manages to provoke the dog anyway, isn't there some mitigation that should be allowed for such a circumstance?
Absolutely. The courts have already created the following defenses against these strict liability laws. Number one, if you warn the victim, that's considered to be assumption of the risk. If the victim goes and does something you warned him against. Okay, so you got assumption of the risk. Sometimes they call it consent. Like when you put up a sign that says beware of dog and somebody comes right in. that can be used as a defense. Trespass is a defense under this particular piece of legislation. Another defense that's been around for hundreds of years is provocation. If you do something like one of the senators here mentioned before, reaching into the dog's cage, or doing something that is provocative to the dog that would cause the dog to react in fear or in surprise, stepping on the dog or that type of thing, hitting the dog, that is also traditionally a defense against this cause of action. So it's not, courts have said that using the term strict liability for this kind of a law is not really accurate. They've called it almost strict liability because these defenses that you mentioned are already in the law.
Thank you.
Mr. Phillips, what about, I have a fence. I have my dog inside. I have a beware of dog sign. A meter reader comes on my property. Do I have a duty to warn them then about my dog?
Well, the meter reader is coming onto your property and has the right to come onto your property. And if your dog, you've already warned them about the dog because you have a sign up, in essence. But if your dog attacks the meter reader, that is something that you will be held liable for, and if the one-bite rule is repealed, because that's your dog, and the meter reader is carrying out a duty that basically was agreed upon. It's either a duty that the utility company has imposed. You have, in essence, imposed it. You haven't put a fence, I guess, where your meter can be read, so you haven't kept your dog away from that area. You have control of that. You know your dog better. Your particular dog might be a very good dog that is in good health, that is properly socialized, properly trained. The dog has never bitten anybody before, so that may be something that you don't have to worry about. But in fashioning, in making a decision as to where the burden should fall, why should it fall on the poor guy doing his job? Because if he doesn't have health insurance, he's stuck. If he is let's say disfigured, he gets bitten in the face, his health insurance is only going to cover the immediate medical emergency, but whatever cosmetic surgery is necessary is not going to be covered.
Thanks.
And you will have homeowner insurance and it will cover you, but he doesn't have that.
Senator Norris.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Phillips.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Senators.